come down today to PADI International Limited's headquarters in Bristol in the UK, and I'm talking to Mark Caney, who is the Vice President of PADI International. Hello Mark, thanks for talking to us today.
My pleasure.
Who and what is PADI?
PADI is the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. It's been around for a long time now, over 40 years, and we are the largest diver training agency in the world by some margin. So we train an awful lot of people to dive, but as recreational divers.
Okay. If you're completely new to diving, have no idea whatsoever where to go, what to do, why should people choose PADI?
Well, many people choose PADI because it's the one organisation they tend to have heard of. And usually, if they know someone that's learned to dive, for example, the chances are it's going to be with PADI, because we are training the vast majority of people. If you would like a more technical reason why, basically we're not only the largest, but we also have the best quality training materials, we believe, and the whole infrastructure which supports the training. In other words, the mechanism by which we train our instructors, the procedures we have in place for monitoring the quality of our dive centres, the whole quality assurance procedures we have to make sure that safety standards are maintained. These all make the PADI brand as well known as it is today. One
advantage for me, certainly, because I did my open water, which is the initial training for divers, was that I could actually do it in one lump, whereas maybe some other organisations you have to spread that over when people are available because they're doing it on a voluntary basis.
That's right. A key part of our success is that we have tried to be flexible and meet the needs of people. People want to be able to do things in one lump, as you say, or they may want to do it in other ways. For example, a relatively recent technique we've evolved is e-learning. So you can be sat at home, perhaps you've just watched an interesting documentary about diving on the TV, and you think, I'd like to learn to dive. You'd find the PADI site on the computer at home, and you could actually start your course there and then, even if it's in the middle of the night at home. You can actually start the theory portion of your course, do it in your own time at home, and then go to a PADI dive centre to actually do the water part.
I understand you can also do maybe some of the theory and classroom sessions over here, and then maybe if you want to take a holiday somewhere abroad, you can actually carry that over to your holiday destination.
That's right. It's a very popular way of doing it. It's what we call a referral. A lot of people like the idea that they could do all the pool and theory stuff here at home in the UK, and then go on holiday and they're ready to start the open water diving immediately. This
isn't just limited to people learning in the UK, is it? This is wherever they are in the world, if they wish to dive with PADI.
Yeah, and of course we're very much a global organisation, and that's another reason why we're so popular. We're translated into a huge number of languages.
You originated in America, I believe.
That's right.
Can you give us some idea of how it started? And
yes, the headquarters are still in America, in California. It was originally started by two men, Ralph Erickson and John Cronin. They basically got the idea to start the training organisation one day in John's house, and there's an actual story about this which is quite famous in our organisation. They came to the details of how they were going to get going over a bottle of whiskey, and Ralph Erickson was from a Norwegian ancestry, and John Cronin was from an Irish ancestry, and when it came down to choosing the name, John said, I don't care what it's called, but it has to have something Irish about it. And so the PADI name actually was chosen because it does have that Irish flavour to it, in recognition of John's heritage.
Right. So how many people do you think have actually qualified over the years? As at least a basic level?
It's in the millions. It's in excess of 10 million. I couldn't tell you the exact number off the top of my head, but we're training now almost 1 million people every year in terms of certifications issued. And that's not including people who are just having a go doing what we call a Discover Scuba diving session, where they've simply gone into the pool or gone into the sea for just one go as a tester to see if they like it.
Can anybody dive?
Pretty much. Certainly there's not a problem in terms of age, generally speaking.
Although you do have a lower age limit,
yes,
for obvious reasons.
For open water diving, we'd be talking 10 as a minimum age, although we do allow 8-year-olds to try it in a swimming pool. The main thing would be to be in reasonable health. There are a few medical conditions which preclude people from diving, but they are quite few, and your doctor could tell you straight away if that's the case or not. Many people think, oh, I've been in swimming pools when I've been on holiday and I've just swum down and my ears hurt, so I couldn't dive. In actual fact, that's rarely the case. There is a simple technique for equalizing that pressure, and most people can dive. If you can fly in a plane, you can dive.
So if you are, what if you're disabled, if you've got some kind of disability that maybe would prohibit you from doing things normally on land?
Well, in many cases, diving can actually be a great way of still doing some kind of activity, because if you can imagine, for example, you didn't have the use of your legs. Now, it's obviously going to stop you moving around as freely as you or I can on land, but underwater, you're weightless. And so you can actually have much more mobility than you would ever have on land. And it can be really a very freeing experience for many people with disabilities to take part in diving. If they're able to meet all of the performance requirements, as we call them, for the course, they can actually get a PADI qualification. In some cases, if people's disabilities prevent them meeting all the requirements of the course, they can still dive, but they won't necessarily get a PADI qualification.
So anybody that is disabled can have specialist training?
There are some specific type of training programs designed for people with more problematic disabilities when it comes to diving. In other words, where they wouldn't necessarily have the full range of mobility to allow them to do all of the things that a typical diver coming into one of our courses would be able to do straight out the box. So there are some specialist training organizations that deal with people who have disabilities who might not be able to meet the requirements of a standard open water diver course, and yet could still get a specific kind of qualification that will allow them to dive, for example, with an additional partner. Normally we dive in a buddy pair with one other diver. If somebody was in a situation where, for example, they were quadriplegic, unable to really use their arms or legs to any significant degree, then the normal recommendation would be is they dive with two partners who would be able to assist them with some things that they wouldn't be able to do by themselves. Now, we do have some special centres as well, which have got something we call an accessibility award. And this indicates a centre, usually a resort, that has particular accommodations for people with disabilities. For example, they'd have accessibility for wheelchairs around the centre and dive boats with special procedures for getting in out of the water, so that even if you were paralysed to some degree, you'd be able to get out of the water.
Now, you mentioned just now about resorts. Apart from the training aspect of learning to dive, there are actual places where people go on holiday where PADI is a name.
That's right.
What's the difference?
Yes, there are two broad types of training establishments, let's say. As you said, there's what we call a resort, a diving resort, and there's also what we call a dive centre. Now, typically you'll find that if you're in a place like the UK, a place which supplies tourists, if you like, then the local diving education establishments are called diving centres. And the primary difference is you'll tend to find a diving centre will have a dive shop associated with it, sells all of the scuba gear, etc., etc. But of course they'll also have a classroom, they'll have some way of getting pool training usually, and so on and so on. A resort tends to be in a destination for divers. So usually somewhere warmer, usually somewhere that specialises in taking people out diving. And they won't necessarily have a dive shop, or it could be on a much smaller scale. Their main focus is taking people diving. You can, of course, get training there as well, but what they're particularly famous for is taking you to nice diving places. So that will often be in somewhere like the Red Sea, or the Mediterranean, or the Maldives, any of the nice places you'd go on holiday.
So diving really is for anybody and everybody?
Yes, absolutely. And the nice thing about diving is that when most people go on holiday, they're usually going to the seaside, somewhere where there's water. And so if there's water there, you can usually dive.
What do you think is the great appeal of actually being underneath the water?
Well, it's really cool for a start, being able to breathe underwater, isn't it? I also, I think, like the fact that you're weightless. This feeling of flying and almost like being in space is pretty fantastic. But the thing which I would say holds my attention is the marine life. That is quite amazing to be able to see all that stuff underwater that most people don't get to see. And the nice thing about diving as well is it's a sport where you can kind of dial up the level of excitement to what you want. For example, some people will say, oh, bungee jumping is something which is very high adrenaline, and it is great, but it's not for everybody. The thing about diving is if you want something very relaxing, very quiet, you can have a nice bimble around in a reef in 5 meters of still water and just look at the pretty fishes. If you want something really exciting, you can go diving with great whites or do deep technical diving, whatever else. You can basically dial the level of excitement to what you want on that particular day. And you think about going diving with sharks, I mean, that's pretty amazing. You wouldn't go to Kenya and walk out into a game park and stand next to a lion. No, but we basically do that underwater all the time, and it's perfectly safe but very exciting.
Absolutely. What guarantee or peace of mind does PADI give to people, do you think?
I think they like the fact that we are a very global brand with established credibility, and that we have this high focus on quality. Now, for example, becoming a PADI instructor is probably the most expensive qualification you can attain in the business as a professional rating.
And you can do this from, you can move up the system?
Yes. But more people choose to do that than any other. And there's a reason for that, and it is the quality associated with the brand. And that's because we take a lot of time to police the quality of the training that's out there and to make sure that when you get a PADI card, you're assured of a certain level of training, backup, etc., etc.
So Mark, if people have sat there watching their televisions thinking, I love those pictures, Jacques Cousteau, people like that, where do they go? Where do they start with diving, learning to dive?
Well, they should start by going to www.padi.com, and there they can find a resort and dive center listing, so they can find out where their nearest dive center is, and then they can actually go in and talk to a PADI instructor and find out about more what's available in their area. Or they could take the option which I mentioned before, which is to do e-learning, start learning online directly. If you look at that list of dive centers, at least you know you're getting a credible dive education location there. You're getting something which is actually approved by PADI. So that's a good starting point.
So it's similar almost to maybe a building organisation having an accreditation for a builder?
Exactly,
okay.
Yes. And you'll see different levels of dive centre there too. You'll have a standard dive centre, a standard dive resort, or you can have a 5-star centre, Gold Palm Resort. These are sort of additional levels of service, more things you'll be able to do there, a wider range of programs they offer. Running right through to instructor development centres, where you can actually go through the full range of programs from open water diver right through to instructor. The highest level we have is something called a career development centre, and that's almost like a diving college.
So that's basically the top end of things once you've realised this is for me to maybe make a living out of.
Yes, well, if we start with how you begin diving, the course that most people start with is the open water diver course. Now for that they're going to do typically 5 theory sessions, which could be home studies through e-learning, or it could be in a more classroom type environment. 5 confined water sessions, which could be done in a swimming pool, or it could be done in a shallow sea if it's a suitable place. And then 4 open water dives. And once they've done all of that successfully, they're then qualified as an open water diver. And that means you're qualified to be able to dive with somebody else at the same level in conditions similar to those you've been trained in.
And a maximum depth as well.
Maximum depth of 18 meters, yes. So that's your passport to start diving, basically. And it doesn't mean you're trained to do everything by any means, but it enables you to get going and start diving without constant supervision. And from there, we recommend people go on to the advanced open water diver course, which takes you a bit further. It takes you into some more interesting specialized areas of diving. For example, deeper diving, or navigation underwater, diving at night perhaps, diving on wrecks, taking photographs underwater, marine life identification, things like that.
So what's the maximum depth that somebody can, with a fully qualified, dive to safely?
In recreational diving, we say 40 meters should be the maximum depth. So that would be somebody who's usually done advanced open water course, probably plus deep diver specialty, and had quite a few dives more experience, yes. It
can be a little disorientating, can't it, diving deeper, because as you dive deeper, your colour perspective changes, doesn't it?
That's right. Yes, the colours literally are changing. It's not how you see them, but the colour is changing, because once you shine light through water, the water actually absorbs the light, starting at the red end of the spectrum and gradually eating its way through towards the blue. So that once you're down at 10 meters, you don't see the color red anymore. It will be a kind of a gray color. And by the time you're getting down to those deeper depths we were talking about, everything's pretty much entirely shades of blue. If you want to see the colors, you can take a torch.
So of course, once you have actually done a qualification, and there are many other than the actual next levels, you get what's called a C card, don't you?
That's right, one of these. Something that looks like that. And it has all your details on the back. And this is basically your proof that you've become trained. And if we're talking again about the open water diver card, for example, that's basically what you need to be able to show that you are qualified to dive. You don't need to be accompanied by an instructor. You can rent equipment. And diving is quite well policed internationally, if you like, by the industry itself, in the sense that if you just turn up in a diving resort anywhere in the world and say, I want to go diving, they won't let you have the equipment without proof that you are a diver. So you need this primarily, plus you need a logbook showing recent experience of diving. And if you don't have that recent experience, most dive centers will expect you to do some kind of an orientation dive with an instructor, just to make sure that you've remembered all the important things.
So it's basically your driving license to dive?
Absolutely, yeah.
Once you've done maybe an open water course, if you don't want to maybe at that time go on to doing the next stage, which is what, advanced open water?
Yes, typically.
You can do little speciality courses, can't you?
You can, yes, yeah, or you can just dive, of course. But many people do specialties. And in fact, you can do an advanced course one dive at a time, that way. For example, you might say, oh, I'd like to do this wreck dive. I'd like to take a camera and take some pictures on this dive. And without much difficulty at all, you can increase what you do on that dive to make it qualify towards that particular program. So a lot of people almost do their advanced open water course without thinking about it, by just doing the dives they want to do, because that's what it's about. The advanced open water course is literally just advancing your skills and taking you into the more adventurous things in diving that you can do.
So typically what speciality courses are on offer?
Well, there's a huge range, but to give you a few examples, we've got digital underwater photography, that's a very popular one. Wreck diver, particularly popular in this country. Night diver, deep diver. We have things like diver underwater propulsion vehicles. It's like a diver tug. Yeah. We have marine life identification. We have a project aware specialty. Then there are some more specialized ones, things like search and recovery. And you might even get what we call distinctive specialties, where an instructor who has a particular skill, or which is something particularly relevant for a region, has got a specialized course which he's developed just for that particular subject in that particular area. Marine archaeology is sometimes used in that way. For example, if there's a particular wreck they're training people to dive on.
I think though it's probably quite important to maybe point out that it is only a recreational qualification to dive, isn't it? And it not in any way for commercial purposes.
No. Commercial diving is very different. And basically in commercial diving you are being like an engineer but underwater. You're doing any of the things that you might be doing on a factory floor situation, in construction, welding, for example, but underwater. So you're very much a working diver, and that does appeal to some people. It doesn't appeal to me, I have to say.
No. Mark, thank you for taking some time to talk to us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.